Hi everybody, it's Stephanie and this is lesson 31. So in our lesson today we have a grammar focus and it's the first of two lessons where we're going to be talking and practicing the topic of gerund and infinitive. So my name's Stephanie, this is level B2 and lesson 31. Okay, so in this lesson, which is, as I explained, the first of two lessons on this topic, we are going to do two main things. Firstly, we are going to review verbs that always take the gerund form, and we're going to review verbs that always take the infinitive form. So this is a nice lesson because unusually, it's not a common thing in English. I can actually say to you, there is a rule, and these are the rules to remember. So that's quite a nice thing. So we've got lots to do in the lesson, so let's get started. Okay, so as I explained, it's a grammar focus and we're thinking about gerund or infinitive. Don't worry if you don't know what these two terms mean. It will become clear very soon. Okay, so as I explained, there are some clear rules here. There are some verbs which are always followed by a gerund form, and some verbs which are always followed by an infinitive. So to make this clearer, we're going to have a look at some examples together so that you can see what I mean. Okay. Let's start with the gerund. Let's look at these two examples. I suggest coming back later. He considered flying first class. So verbs like suggest and consider, when you use another verb after these verbs, you need to put that second verb into a gerund, an ing form. So see, in the first example, the verb to come becomes coming. In the second example, fly is flying, because come and fly both follow verbs which always use a gerund form. Let's have a look at some more examples. So, the infinitive. He decided to try the sashimi. The boss offered to pay for lunch. After verbs like decide and offer, you need to use an infinitive form. So the infinitive, I mean to try, to pay. So if we have a look at our examples, we've got the verbs decide and offer. The rule is following these verbs, you must use an infinitive. Decided to try the sashimi. The boss offered to pay for lunch. So what you have to remember, what you have to focus on is the verb that's following has to change. So have a look at the first verb. Is it in the group that always takes a gerund? Is it in a group that always takes the infinitive? And then you need to conjugate the second verb in the right way. Don't worry if it seems complicated, it's not, and we're going to practice. So let's start with the gerund form. Okay, so don't be intimidated by this list, but this is just to give you an idea of verbs which are followed by a gerund form. As you can see, there are a lot. But the interesting thing to note, I think, is that most of these verbs are very common verbs that you will see in the English language. So it's very important to think about this topic. However, there's a lot of verbs there, and don't worry, we're not going to be practicing all of them today. When you come across a big list like that, it's the same if we have a vocabulary lesson and there's a lot of new words. It's impossible to try and memorize all of them. If you do that, you run the risk of forgetting everything and then having a sense of not achieving. The best thing to do is to try and choose some, maybe 6, try to identify 6 out of the list that you think would be useful, would be relevant, would be verbs that you can use, and then focus on those 6. So that's my tip. And to help you, I have chosen 6 verbs for you. So the 6 verbs I suggest looking at today are risk, suggest, postpone, avoid, consider, and finish. So again, these are 6 verbs that I think you will use regularly when you're speaking English. They're 6 verbs you're likely to hear regularly as well. And these 6 verbs are always followed by another verb in a gerund form. Let's practice. Number 1, the weather forecast said snow, so Mr. and Mrs. Blake postponed home. The verb is drive. Number 2, I think it's best if we avoid about the subject of money. The verb is talk. Number 3, have you finished the form? The verb is fill out. Pause the slide for a moment and see if you can correctly change the verbs into the gerund form. Nice and easy. It's just to illustrate what this looks like. So hopefully you finished those 3. We have numbers 4, 5, and 6. I don't want to risk late. The verb is be. Number 5, I suggest the sashimi first. The verb is try. And number 6, have you considered another language? The verb is learn. Pause the slide again and write down the verbs for numbers 4, 5, and 6. So nice and straightforward there, nice and easy. But the point I wanted to make is that it is very easy. The only thing you have to try to remember is which are gerund verbs and which are infinitive. But in this list, these verbs are always followed by the gerund. So hopefully you have the same answers as me. So number 1, the weather forecast said snow, so Mr. and Mrs. Blake postponed driving home. Number 2, I think it's best if we avoid talking about the subject of money. Number 3, have you finished filling out the form? Number 4, I don't want to risk being late. Number 5, I suggest trying the sashimi first. And number 6, have you considered learning another language? So in these answers, I've highlighted both verbs so you can see the first verb, which gives you the clue, gerund or infinitive, and the second verb, which has to be correctly formed. Postpone driving, avoid talking, finish filling, risk being, suggest trying, consider learning. All of these, so postpone, avoid, finish, risk, suggest, and consider, will always be followed by a gerund. And as I said at the beginning, it's nice when there's a rule that you can remember. Okay, so we've looked at the gerund. Let's move on and talk a little bit about the infinitive form. So So as with the gerund, I'm going to show you a list of verbs that are followed by the infinitive. Again, don't feel put off, don't feel overwhelmed by this. This is just to give you the information. So again, it's a long list. Again, you'll see verbs on there that are very common, very everyday words. Some that are perhaps less so common, like maybe endeavour or threaten, that you're less likely to use. And again, my tip to you, when you meet a long list like this, don't try to memorise everything. Choose, be specific, choose 6 that you think you can use. Because once you've used them, once they've become part of your language, then you will remember them. If you choose verbs you're never going to use, you'll never practice them, and then it's very easy to forget. Don't worry though, I have chosen 6 for you from this list. Again, 6 very normal verbs. So number 1, manage. Number 2, hope. Number 3, seem. Number 4, decide. Number 5, afford. And number 6, expect. These verbs are always followed by a verb in the infinitive form. Okay, are you ready to practice? Again, very easy because you know these are followed by an infinitive. So, number 1, how can you manage such high rent? The verb is pay. Number 2, I'm worried that I won't be able to afford to college. The verb is go. Number 3, I expect you here on time tomorrow. The verb is be. So pause the slide a moment and write down your 3 answers here. Okay, hopefully you have 3 verbs there. Let's move on to numbers 4, 5 and 6. Number 4, they hope to see the Great Wall of China while they are there. The verb is be able. Number 5, you seem worried recently. The verb is be. And for number 6, I just need to move myself down a little bit here. So I need to decide what about the problem, and the verb is do. I need to decide what about the problem, and the verb is do. So again, pause the slide and see if you can write down the answers to 4, 5 and 6. Okay, so again, very clear rule. These verbs are always followed by an infinitive form, so you have no choice here. But because you know it's infinitive, it should be quite easy. Let's check the answers together. Number 1, how can you manage to pay such high rent? Number 2, I'm worried that I won't be able to afford to go to college. Number 3, I expect you to be here on time tomorrow. Number 4, they hope to be able to see the Great Wall of China while they are there. Number 5, you seem to be worried recently. And number 6, I need to decide what to do about the problem. So again, I've highlighted both of the verbs, so manage, to pay, afford, to go, expect, to be, hope, to be able, seem to be, decide, to do. So again, it's the first verb that tells you gerund or infinitive, but it's the second verb that you need to put into the relevant form. Hopefully you got 6 out of 6 there. nice and straightforward. It was just to illustrate that it's the second verb that you need to change. So obviously the challenging thing here, the challenging point, is remembering which verbs are in the infinitive list and which verbs are in the gerund. Remember, we looked at 6 and 6 today. So for our final exercise, for the final part of this lesson, I have 12 sentences. So it's the 12 verbs we've talked about, but I've put them in a different order, and I haven't told you which ones take a gerund and which ones take an infinitive. So I suggest you read the sentence with me, and maybe you have a feeling it sounds natural. If you don't worry. Go back and have a look at the slide that will tell you which form it takes. But let's have a look at the 12 sentences together, and let's see how you do. Okay, so number 1, I managed him after 2 hours. Your verb is reach. Number 2, I hope you when I visit Milan next month. The verb is see. Number 3, James suggested the accounts manager from Fiat. Number 4, we have postponed the catalogue until next month. Number 5, you seem some doubts about the idea. The verb is have. Number 6, he avoided the question for fear of making a mistake. The verb is answer. Have you considered a new branch in Tokyo? The verb is open. We have decided not the Chinese market. The verb is enter. Number 9, we can't afford any more money at the moment. The verb is invest. Number 10, I can't risk my train, so I want to leave early. The verb is miss. Number 11, we expect our investment within 5 years. The verb is recover. And number 12, she's finished her homework assignment, and the verb is write. So remember here, the important verb is the first one. So in sentence 1, manage. What follows manage? Is it a gerund or infinitive? Which sounds more natural? I managed reaching him after 2 hours, or I managed to reach him after 2 hours. Number 2, I hope seeing you, or I hope to see you. So pause the slide, read them through by yourself, and see maybe you have a feeling it sounds more natural. If you don't, have a look back at the list. They're the 6 verbs that we looked at with the gerund and the 6 verbs that we looked at with the infinitive. So pause the slide and try to fill out the sentences. Okay, how do you think you did there? Shall we have a look at the answers together? So hopefully you'll have 6 with an infinitive and 6 with a gerund. So number 1, I managed to reach him after 2 hours. Number 2, I hope to see you when I visit Milan next month. Number 3, James suggested meeting the accounts manager from Fiat. Number 4, we have postponed printing the catalogue until next month. Number 5, you seem to have some doubts about the idea. Number 6, he avoided answering the question for fear of making a mistake. Number 7, have you considered opening a new branch in Tokyo? Number 8, we have decided not to enter the Chinese market. Number 9, we can't afford to invest any more money at the moment. Number 10, I can't risk missing my train, so I want to leave early. Number 11, we expect to recover our investment within 5 years. And number 12, she's finished writing her homework assignment. So I've colour-coded these to make these more visual for you. So you can see the ones in blue are the verbs with the infinitive: manage, to reach, hope, to see, seem to have, decide to enter, afford to invest, expect to recover. And the ones in orange are the gerund form: suggest meeting, postpone printing, avoid answering, consider opening, risk missing, and finish writing. Well done if you managed to get those 12 correct. If you'd like to practice more, which is a great idea, there is an exercise that you can try after you've watched this slide, which will give you further practice, again, of just the 12 that we've looked at. And I'll emphasize that point again, that it's really important. Select some, not all of them, select some and practice those ones until they become part of your language. Really well done for the lesson today. As I explained, this is part 1. So in gerund and infinitive 2, which will be lesson 33, we're going to have a look at a group of different verbs which sometimes take a gerund form and sometimes take an infinitive form. But for the lesson today, you just need to think about the rules. It's very clear that I explained earlier. Lesson 32 will be a vocabulary lesson, a very relevant topic if you are studying for IELTS. We are going to be talking about music. So there's lots to talk about in that field. Hopefully I will see you in lesson 32. But from lesson 31, thank you very much for joining me, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.